Good afternoon. My name is Brenda von Ahsen, and you're listening to Catholic versus Atheist.
So tell the listeners a little bit about yourself, if you would please, who you are, what you believe, and how you came to believe what you believe.
My name is Brenda. I am a 62-year-old male to female trans woman. I came to have my atheistic beliefs at some time, I don't know, in my late adolescence. I generally believe in a scientific materialist world. I don't believe in the alternatives, which are various forms of panpsychism, dualism, idealism. I don't think that those make a lot of sense to me.
Okay. Before we get too much into ideas, I usually like to ask my guests about childhood, the earliest memories that have anything to do with God or religion, and then just sort of a sketch of what the home life was like, if there was any inkling of religion in the home.
Oh, I was raised Lutheran, ALC Synod, and I had a fairly uneventful childhood as far as religion goes. I believed in religion for quite some time. However, I read a great deal. I've always read throughout most of my life. I've read a great deal. And at some point in my adolescence, I came to believe that atheism was the way to go. I had the usual dalliances with various ideas. I remember reading Ayn Rand and believing in her for like about 15 minutes before rejecting her. I think you're not a good adolescent if you don't believe in Ayn Rand for at least 15 minutes. And you're not a very good adult if you don't reject her. I was affiliated with the American Atheist community for a brief period of time. I subscribed to secular humanist magazines when there was such a thing as physical magazines. I once went to an atheist convention in Washington, D.C. and met Madalyn Murray O'Hair. And that was somewhat disillusioning because she was a very difficult person, in my opinion. She was very selfish and self-centered. However, I think about somewhat less than 50% of the people in the convention ever even left their rooms and came down to the convention floor. I think there were other things going on. I went to college locally in my town. However, I dropped out due to it being the 70s and my having a lot of gender identity issues, which were very confusing, caused me a lot of distress and depression. And I was unable to figure myself out at that time because there were no public sources available to work these things out with. And then I entered the working world, and I worked for a very long time in a medical clinical situation as a paramedical type person, basically an orderly, transferring people to and from their therapy and things like that.
So what was it like coming out as an atheist? What was it like coming out as transgender? And if you're homosexual, what was it like coming out as a homosexual?
I don't think I've ever been homosexual. When I transitioned from male to female, my identity as being heteronormative simply remained, and so I was then attracted to men. Coming out as an atheist wasn't really a big deal because it was a somewhat liberal household, and as you, I don't know if you know or not, but the ALC is a fairly liberal denomination in the Lutheran Church. Coming out as trans was a big deal. I became estranged from my family, friends and family. I lost jobs. I became homeless twice. I now have housing assistance here, and I'm quite poor, but I do manage to get by. It really sucks being homeless as a trans person. It's very difficult.
Did you reconcile with your parents?
Oh, yes. My father and I reconciled, and my mom somewhat more so. My father passed away about 5 years ago from metastatic bone cancer, but with the help of a therapist and family therapy sessions, we had come to a good understanding with each other. And even though my dad was difficult growing up because he had some very antiquated views of masculinity, in the later years, he was much softened up in his attitudes and was very accepting. And we reconciled, and I love my father very much. And my mom and I have a good relationship, and we speak by phone every week. I still have a relationship with my siblings. I'm the oldest of 4, and we have a decent relationship with all of my siblings. It varies between them. Some is a little bit more distant than others, but that's just the way it goes.
Are any religious in any way, shape, or form? Or are they all sort of secular, agnostic, atheist?
Well, I think my sister is religious, and my 2 brothers, I think, are not, although I couldn't say for sure exactly. It is not something I get into with family. I don't think that that's very useful to get into religious arguments with your family. It doesn't get you anywhere.
Yeah, for sure.
One of the reasons I reached out to you is because I'm looking for venues to have discussions with people that are free of the Strom and Drang of the Discord world, where there are just dozens of people angrily arguing with each other, shouting at each other, and interrupting each other. And I find that extremely frustrating. I would rather have productive conversations. So the other night, I had a conversation on modern day debates with the young Gregory, a 12-year-old boy who is a bit precocious. We debated I think it was, I'm not sure if it was really the Kalam or not. It was a sort of a variant of William Lane Craig's argument, the argument from contingency. But my main objective in that conversation was simply to model normative values about having a debate between 2 people. I didn't feel comfortable being very aggressive because he's a 12-year-old boy. And when we reached impasses, and we did a couple of times where I don't feel that he was really significantly addressing my concerns, I simply changed the subject rather than try to hammer it. There seems to be a culture on the internet, in particular venues, of it being like a wrestling match, of winning, of pwning other people, of demolishing arguments. A lot of aggressive imagery is used to describe these conversations. It's not very productive, and I'm more interested in having more respectful conversations with people. And so I'm looking to expand this a little bit more. I've been on I don't know if you're familiar with the application called Discord.
No.
It is a social app that you can install or use through a web browser, and there are thousands upon thousands of servers associated with it, most of them probably having to do with gaming, but there's a lot of political and philosophical people also, and it's not a very healthy place, in my opinion. It can be very toxic. For the most part, it's a waste of time because nobody ever respects anybody. People overtalk, shout down at each other, yell at each other and stuff. It has uses when there are some people that are friends of mine that I can talk to on it. But other than that, it's not a good use of your time. And so I'm looking for more venues where I can have more interesting conversations.
Yeah, well, can I suggest to you that I visited your YouTube channel. There were no videos. So I'm wondering, why don't you start a humble little podcast like what I do? I'm a complete nobody. I just wanted to talk to people, and now I'm talking to people. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, so the reason my YouTube channel has no content is because I've been for a very long time terrified of having any content, because there is a great deal of hate and negativity in this world, and I just didn't want to attract that. So I just used it as a personal account and not as a public thing. Another thing I've done for the past 3 years has been debating flat earthers. That's fairly interesting to me, because a lot of the tactics and the strategies that people who believe the earth is flat use in order to avoid coming to face the fact that the earth is indeed not flat mirror and resemble the tactics used by other people in other subject areas, whether it's politics or religion. You see the same kinds of obfuscation, goalpost moving, all those other tactics. And it was interesting to me from that point of view. The flat earth community is extremely conservative, racist, anti-Semitic, sexist, and authoritarian. They believe in the literal Bible, and they quote the Bible quite often as support of their beliefs. And some of the people are outright mentally ill. Some of them seem to me to be cognitively impaired. And then there's a fair number of people that are the trolls who feed on these people. It's sort of distressing that quite a number of the people in there don't actually believe in it. They're there just to make money from Patreon contributions and selling T-shirts and coffee mugs.
Wow. It's a sad, sad world we live in. It's tragic. And the internet is a sick, sick place. There's a lot of really disgusting stuff that you can look up. And just being a curious, godless atheist, I went there, and I do have some images in my head that I really wish I did not have in my head. But when I converted, I stopped all that by the grace of God, and now I just use the internet for things that are edifying and uplifting. And from my Catholic perspective, obviously, a lot of that has to do with religion and prayer and stuff like that. So I'm not looking at porn. I'm not looking at sick violence or aberrations. So I just want to let you know and let everyone listening know that there is a lot of good on the internet. Even if you're not religious, you can still find the good, right?
Yes. Well, we tend to see what we look for. We tend to find what we look for, right? So there is both good and bad in human beings. Human beings can be extremely bad, but they can be very good. And it depends on what you look for. So, yeah, how do you see yourself in relation to the great mass of humanity who disappoint us so very much?
I'm not sure what you mean. Can you rephrase the question?
Well, just what we were talking about. We both of us were in agreement that the internet is a very disappointing place. It's dispiriting in the sense that it's not the best example of humanity. If aliens came down and they said, "Tell us about yourselves," I wouldn't point them to the internet.
Yeah. The thing is, I find it like a little glimpse into the hearts and the minds of these strangers that I've never met. I do believe that there is a lot of woundedness. People are hurt. They're hurt by family members. They're hurt by strangers. They're hurt by unjust application of laws or unjust laws. They're hurt by accidents that happen, like you get in a car accident, your body's in pain. So there are a lot of questions we can ask, and this gives me a lot of compassion for everyone. When I go on my YouTube channel, I get a lot of nasty comments, and there's some people that just keep coming back. Every time I post something, they come back and they post a lot of negative comments. And my instinct is to just be hurt or whatever. But I tell myself, this is a human being who's taking their time, their valuable time on this planet to go onto my Catholic podcast and to comment with these hateful comments. There must be something behind that. There must be a reason why this person is scratching at this itch time and time again. They keep scratching at that itch and they can't get the relief they want, and they're not getting the answers they want, and they're not getting any satisfaction. And I have nothing but compassion for these people. Of course, I have to have a bit of a thick skin because I can't take it to heart too much. I can't lose sleep over every stranger that's out there that is troubled or disturbed or that's just being annoying for the sake of being annoying. For all I know, they're not wounded. They're just having a good time. But it certainly is a strange form of entertainment to seek out a Catholic podcast and just put nasty comments with each and every post that I make. I get a lot of negativity. I also get a lot of positivity, so it balances out. But for those who are negative, I think this is a human being. They have a history, they have a background, they have a reason why they are the way they are. And I'm curious to know them. I'm curious to invite them onto my show. And the ones that are most negative, they never come on the show. It's people like you, people that are open-minded, friendly, loving, respectful. And you and I disagree on a lot of stuff, but that doesn't prevent us from loving each other, from respecting each other, from listening to each other.
I know myself too well to say that I'm a loving person all the time. I've been told many times I should develop a thick skin. The problem is it doesn't last. Eventually, something gets to you. You get like the final straw, and then I get very, very angry. And a lot of the past sort of bottling it up comes out. And that's very unfortunate. And I can't always do anything about that.
One of the differences is that I'm not persecuted because of my look or my identity or my gender or my sexuality or anything like that. I fit right into what people are pressuring me to be. No one's rounding up the pitchforks to come and get me. right? Other than the fact that I'm Catholic, like I do have a lot of enemies because of that. And I've lost friends because of that. But I think your situation is a little bit more dangerous. You get a lot more bigotry and hatred, which really I think is less justifiable. I can understand why someone would be angry at the Catholic Church. I mean, it makes more sense to me, objectively speaking, for someone to be angry at the Catholic Church because they don't understand it and they just see all the abuses and everything, right? It makes more sense than to come after some individual who happens to be a bit different from what they expect them to be, right?
America has a long history of anti-Catholic sentiment and bias. It goes back quite a ways into our history. And there are quite a number of Protestants, particularly of the Calvinist variety, seem to be fairly prominent, at least on the internet, even though they represent a small portion of Protestantism, who just feel that Catholicism is not even true Christianity. What is your reaction to what some people have called a Christianist belief that my denomination is the one true version of Christendom and anybody else is simply not a true Christian?
Well, again, I just have compassion for these people because my church teaches that we're all brothers and sisters, even the atheists, the Buddhists, the Hindus, whatever. We're all brothers and sisters. We all are members of the same family, and we all have a portion of the truth, and we're all here to love and support each other and to get closer to the truth. And of course, there are lines drawn in the sand. You can't just do whatever you want to do and claim to be a Catholic. I mean, you have to qualify to be a Catholic, but my Protestant brothers and sisters are Christian. They just don't happen to have the fullness. So whereas I have 7 sacraments, they only have 2 or maybe 1 or maybe 0 sacraments that they believe are sacraments. And there are many, many other theological and doctrinal issues that separate us. But the fundamental issue for a Christian is to believe in the triune God and that Jesus Christ, the second person of the Trinity, incarnated, he suffered and died for our sins, and so on and so forth. It's really not that complicated. So to call yourself a Christian and to exclude other Christians from Christianity, yeah, that's a form of bigotry and it's a form of prejudice. And so I have to have compassion on these people because they're missing out. They're robbing themselves of a part of their humanity, really. So it's all about education. It's all about bringing people closer together, breaking down the walls, breaking down the barriers, breaking down the fears. And I mean, the fear is really what fuels all hatred. I mean, whether it's racism, sexism, or homophobia, or whatever it is.
Yeah. Anger and those things are often masks for fear and uncertainty. So when I was raised in the Lutheran Church, Catholicism light. I was taught that the biblical literalists were guilty of idolatry of the text, that they worshipped the text more than God through the text. So, and you tend to agree with that analysis?
Sure. Yeah, there are dangers on every side for us Christians. We can worship the structure, we can worship the religion. There's a famous saying in Catholicism, religion is a crutch for those who lack faith. So there's a sort of tendency to fall into Pharisaical legalism, rigorism, the rules. Okay, I got my checklist. I did all my prayers. I did all my things. I did this. I did that. Okay. So there's a tendency for Catholics to fall into that. And there's a tendency for non-Catholics to fall into it in their own way, because everyone has a set of doctrines. Everyone has a set of rules. Everyone has the 10 Commandments. Everyone has their interpretation of the scriptures. And everyone can idolize absolutely anything. You can take anything, no matter how holy, and you can idolize it. And one of the Catholic teachings, which is most wholesome, is that everything is good. There's nothing that you can point me to or that you can mention to me that is evil. Everything is ontologically good. Everything has existence. Everything is good. Now, there are some things that are falling away from existence, like you can picture, for example, 2 apples. One of them is healthy and wholesome and whole. The other one's half eaten by worms and maggots and corruption and decay. So which one has more being? It's the healthy, whole one, right? And so the other one is falling away from existence. So this is the Catholic philosophy when it comes to ontology. Everything that is good. And God ultimately is, in the most supreme way, So he has that highest place in terms of goodness also. So all of this to say that we can turn any good, like the Bible, like money, like sex, like power, like music, whatever it is, we can turn it into an idol, a false god, and we can be in grave danger, by focusing on these goods, because that's the only thing that we have are goods. There is no such thing as an evil thing. For example, one of my favorite atheists on my channel that makes fun of me all the time, he's one of the most antagonistic. His name is Robert White. He recently made a comment that I sometimes prolong my S's. I sound like a snake, but snakes are good. Even Satan himself is good. So when we think about the picture of the Garden of Eden, and we think about Satan in the form of a snake tempting Adam and Eve to disobey God, Satan is good. Serpents are good. And one of the images of Jesus Christ actually is a serpent on a pole. When people were being bitten by the snakes in the time of Moses, God said to put a brass serpent on a pole, and people were to gaze on it in order to be healed. And this is an image or a type of Jesus Christ. Make no mistake about it, snakes are good. So are spiders, so are rats, and so are all the things, the creepy crawlies that I'm afraid of, but they're all ontologically good. The only thing that's evil is the way in which we choose these goods. And this is why only humans have the capacity for morality, because only they have free will to choose, according to my Catholic teachings.
I noticed that animals do have moral behaviors.
Well, remember that animals are good and they have instincts which are good, but we live in a fallen world. And when I'm speaking to you, I'm not preaching to you, I'm just explaining my point of view, right? So from my Catholic point of view, animals are good and they do have instincts which are God-given and which are good, but they also live in a fallen world. So we do see disease, we do see death among the animals, and we do see them fighting, and we do see stuff that is ugly even in the animal kingdom. But they don't have reason, and they don't have free will. If you were able to convince me that an animal, any animal other than a human animal, has the use of reason and free will, then I would abandon Christianity. That's a deal breaker for me.
Well, I think they're capable of reasoning, just not at the same level that we are able to.
Yeah, there's cogitation. There definitely is cogitation, but they don't have a rational soul yet.
Well, that's what I'm counting as reasoning, this cogitation. So the classic example of the crow, right, that bends the wire to hook out a piece of food from the jar, there was reasoning going on there. It's cogitation, as you might say. There was some kind of thoughts and possibly even beliefs that if I hook it this way, I can pull this thing out of there and eat it. So I would say that that's reasoning. And it's been observed among the higher primates that they have a sense of fairness. They don't like other members of their own group being treated differently than they are. They have this sense of fairness, which seems to me to indicate a sort of moral sense. I think there's been some evidence that animals have moral intuitions.
For sure. So the difference between the way that you will, we could examine the same behavior in animals, and we could agree about most of what's happening, but the way that you'll see it and the way that I see it ultimately will be different, because what I'll be looking for is more than what is on display among these lower animals, because what I'm calling reason will always manifest in things like fine arts and music and philosophy, religion, and these sorts of things. Whereas when you see an animal solving problems or communicating, you think, oh, this animal has the use of reason and it must have free will and so on and so forth. But I don't see that, because my definition, the Catholic definition of free will and reason is way more elevated, and you would need to have these higher cultural behaviors manifesting.
Sure. I just think that there's probably a continuum of reasoning ability and cultural, ethical, and linguistic abilities from animals to humans. I don't think that there's this sharp delineation between us and animals. We're very adept at language and at cogitation and moral intuitions, but we're not categorically different, in my opinion.
Now, you consider yourself an atheist, right?
Yeah. Agnostic atheist, I think, is the term of art used today.
Okay. I usually like to ask atheists about their morality. What is the philosophical basis of morality in the philosophical framework of atheism, given the fact that if there's only the natural, there's no supernatural, and if the principle of causality is the case, then there simply cannot be any free will, and if there's no free will, then there can't be any morality. I mean, I've said this so many times in so many conversations with atheists, and I've never really had a good response. Have you heard me say that, and have you got something different to say than what you've heard the others say?
Moral philosophy is a very difficult discipline. I don't pretend to have a good grasp on it. I would say that I'm a compatibilist as far as free will goes. I think that our moral and ethical beliefs are simply expressions of dislike and distaste, and I don't want other people to hurt me. So I would like to have an agreement with them that they will not hurt me and I will not hurt them. And I think that from that, a lot of moral structures have evolved. I'm a strong believer in evolution. So I think that these things arose from evolutionary necessity of us living. Humans are not sharks. We do not patrol the depths of the ocean alone for most of our lives. We live in groups, and living in a group, you necessarily have to get along. So you have to come to an agreement about right behavior.
In terms of your strengths and weaknesses intellectually, where would you say that you have put in the most reading, the most thinking, the most conversations? Is it in the realm of ontology, epistemology? Like, where would you say your strengths and weaknesses are, sort of in the landscape of ideas?
Definitely, I would say that morality is a weak spot of mine. I have broad interests, and then I'm confronted with the internet, which is vast and deep. And I tend to look at a lot of arguments against presuppositionalists and ways of dealing with that. But I don't think that I would have to use those kinds of arguments with you. I don't think that you're a presuppositionalist, right?
Not really, although I do have to admit that I find it intriguing. So I am curious about the presuppositionalism, but I don't get excited by listening to people have a heated debate or to argue, or for one guy to win and the other guy to lose. I'm really excited about love. I'm excited about the mystery of the human being and the infinite dignity of each human being and the vulnerability of the human being, those who allow themselves to be vulnerable at times. And self-sacrifice, if you can see that, that's really touching. So I think you know by now that at the end of my interviews, I do ask my guests to give the closing thought, something positive, something uplifting, just a little message of hope. So what do you think you might be able to say to anyone that's out there listening now?
In the end, it's vast nothingness and the sweet, sweet release of death and eternal night.
Yeah. And now you can give a nice positive message of hope.
The USSR still has 10 more nuclear reactors built exactly like the one that exploded at Chernobyl still in operation.
So listen, you know that there are a lot of people that are struggling to find a reason to live. There are a lot of people that are suicidally depressed. And a lot of people are actually really at the end of the rope. So they could tune into the show and they could hear you say something that would sort of remind them of some of the reasons that they have to stick around. So can you just try to sincerely find something positive to say to those people that are desperate, please?
Outliving your enemies is the best reward.
Come on.
That's pretty good. I find I'll try. I'll do it. I'm going to try. I find tremendous solace in experiencing the immediate wonder and beauty of the world around me, and simply being in the moment and being aware of everything around you and the privilege of being alive and sentient and able to have these experiences is in and of itself a great privilege. Whether one is a theist or not, it is a privilege to be alive and aware of the world around us, and that can sometimes be enough.
If you like your worldview, if you think it's swell, if you got some questions, ask me and I'll tell. All you got to do is ask. All you got to do is ask.